Hey everyone, how we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and today we're going to review a hand sent in by Christoffer. This is a hand from 100 No Limit, where Christoffer has queens and needs to figure out what to do on a very nasty river card. So let's check it out. Okay, in this spot we're playing four-handed, there's an open limp, falls to hero who decides to raise, and here we are. So Christoffer says in his write-up that the villain here had lost 3 hands in a row and seemed a bit tilted. Definitely good information for us to have, but if that's the case, I definitely want to see a larger raise size here. I really want to see you punish this dude. I mean, you're four-handed, you have queens, whatever, these are huge factors for our hand, but we have someone who's tilted, who's probably going to be more inelastic. We have a value hand, let's just start smashing and going from there. So raising to something like 6 would be much better in my opinion. I think 4 is okay, I just think it's a little suboptimal considering the information you've given. So we end up getting called, end up going heads up to it. Hero decides to bet, and of course we end up getting called, and of course that's just standard from someone who's tilty and probably going to be taking a lot of flops off. So in this situation, of course, we have 2 different options. We could just go for the normal betting route, which of course is what it looks like Hero is going to be doing here, where we just bet big on flop, turn, and river, go for pure big value, and go from there. The other option, of course, is looking for a check raise somewhere along the way, trying to induce bets, but also trying to induce extra 3 bets or extra lightness or extra big pots that can get explosive rather than just going for bet. Maybe it's bet and then check raise turn, or maybe it's check raise flop and go from there. And this is the kind of situation where I would actually much rather look for a check raise on the flop. I think a check raise on the flop is a really pretty option. I think that's one where 9-3 is going to bet a large chunk of his hand, so we get some extra value from pure air, which is always great. And also the times that he has something like Jack X or 9X or a draw, even though there aren't a ton of draws considering we have queen, so it blocks out things like Queen 10, King Queen, and all that kind of stuff. This is the kind of situation where I just think that he's going to make a lot of mistakes against it. And if you check raise small, right, so say we check, he bets something like $6 or $7, we check raise up to something like 16 to 20, I think that gives a lot of room for him to think, wait a second, that looks like ace king, I'm just going to shove it here, and then we snap, and it's a really fun, profitable game for us. So if you've never at least considered the check raise in spots like this, it's definitely a really pretty option, especially against the kind of people that are tilted, that are going to talk themselves into doing some really silly stuff. Don't just take the default bet. It's going to be very difficult to get stacks inside, when check raising can be a very valid option. If nothing else, you make money the times they miss when they just stab at it, but you can also make home run potential a lot of different ways. But in this exact situation, end up getting called, go to the turn, hero bets again, nice big bet, so it really looks like we're taking this bet line, all big sizes, happy with that if we're going to take the bet line, end up getting called, and go to this interesting river card. So in his write-up, Christoffer says this: the river brings probably the worst card in the deck. I don't feel like I get called by worse here, so I decide to check and see what he does. He bets out about half pot. I feel like if he had 2 pair, he probably would have raised the turn, and I also feel like he doesn't have many jacks in his range since he has a decent PFR and would have raised 2 broadways preflop. Jack 10 is probably the only thing I have to be afraid of, because I think he bets any 9 here and bluffs with his whiff draws, so I call. So I agree with a lot of stuff in this write-up. Yes, I think he does not have a tremendous amount of Jack X, if nothing else because he didn't raise preflop, and if he does have a PFR, I think he's definitely raising Ace Jack, King Jack, Queen Jack, Jack 10, all that kind of stuff preflop, which really doesn't leave a tremendous amount of Jack X left. And if there is a tremendous amount of Jack X left, somehow this person shows up with Jack 7 or Jack 6, that also means there's probably a tremendous amount of 9X as well, and then again, we're back to there's a lot more 9X combos than there are Jack X combos, and that's a good thing for us. And just in general, if we look at this spot, it's four-handed. I have an overpair. My opponent is tilty. When these factors are true, it essentially takes a crowbar to get me to release my hand. It's just not going to happen. So my only real question on the river is it more profitable to check call, or is it more profitable just to bet it myself? Now, Christoffer here is making the assumption that there's a decent amount of withdraws in his opponent's range. And if that's the case, then sure, it definitely makes a lot more sense to check, because if you bet, he folds the withdraw. If you check, he probably bets the withdraw and tries to turn it into a bluff. So that's a great thing for us. The only issue is that there shouldn't be a tremendous amount of withdraws, simply because we have queen, so it blocks out queen 10. If this person's tilty, they probably play draws more aggressively earlier in the hand, so I don't think this is the kind of situation where we're looking at a ton of withdraws, and if we are, they're probably not, they're just going to be made in very interesting and weird ways, so it really just depends on how tilty you think he is. And the other thing is with the 9 is that if my opponent has the 9 and I check, what bet would they bet for with 9x? And if I bet myself, what number would they call with 9x? And I think players are far more likely to call, tilty players especially, are far more likely to call a big bet with 9x than they are to bet big with 9x themselves if we check to them. So I think even if villain has 9x, we leave money on the table here because we could have bet this for 45 or 50 and gotten called by 9x versus checking, facing a $30 or $40 bet, and now all of a sudden we're leaving money on the table against that same hand that would have made a bigger call otherwise. So it really, at the end of the day, comes down heavily to how often you think this person is bluffing and what are they bluffing with. So if you think they're bluffing a lot, making the check call makes a lot of sense because they're just not going to be able to call you very often on the river, but you can definitely check, induce that bluff, and pick it off and feel very, very comfortable. And in this situation, villain actually ends up showing up with ace deuce, which is one of those weird whiff draws that came through. So again, definitely kind of proves that this person is a little bit tilty and doing some pretty atypical stuff. But again, that river discussion is really important for figuring out which is more valuable. Is it more valuable to check call, or is it more valuable just to fire yourself? And it really depends on how you're building that range. If you're building that range with a lot of whiff draws, I like villain's line. If you're building villain's range with a lot of like single pairs, I really like betting, and I really like betting on the larger side of the spectrum. So Christoffer, thank you very much for the great hand. If you or anyone else has a poker hand you'd like me to review in a video, feel free to send it to me directly at splitsuit.com/send. You can always ask me a poker question at splitsuit.com/ask. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or thoughts on this hand, feel free to drop a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you back next week with a brand new video, and in the meantime, good luck out there, and happy grinding.